Inspiration Forge.
So, welcome to Inspiration Forge. This is John, aka the Angry Dwarf. Today's project is a Roman watchtower, which is also going to function as a dice tower. So, there are three parts to this build. So, if you enjoy the first part, please look for the links below and follow along and check out the other two parts as well. So, if you weren't sure what a Roman watchtower looked like, this is a picture of a reconstruction of one. As you can see, it's built out of primarily wood. Some of them, though, were built of stone or brick or a combination of brick and wood, primarily just that tower shape with an upper deck and a roof to it. And that's what we'll be building today. Never let it be said that I don't plan out my builds. You can see these very detailed sketches and blueprints here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to test fit all these pieces here together, and I'm going to pin them together so that I can see what they're like before I glue them and get my measurements right, so I don't have to be pinning and gluing and cutting and ripping apart like I did with mine. So for those of you familiar with carpentry, one of the things I've done here is just preset my pins. Just makes it a little bit easier. I don't have to be fumbling and holding with them, and that's going to help me put the whole thing together here. So as with carpentry, one of the things that sometimes helps is just being able to get your pieces lined up, whether it's on the edge of a table or sometimes holding one in a vise. In this case, this container here worked out perfectly just to hold this, and as a result, I was able to get those pins started at both ends. And you'll know when you hit the foam, it just makes a much firmer grip as opposed to sliding in loosely if you missed it. So I'm just going to pin those two firmly together now. So next step here, now that I've got that one pin, I did leave a little bit of the head out so it's a little bit easier, you see it there, to pull it out. I've got this flush now at the bottom. I'm just going to add this other side on here, and as you can see, that by keeping it down here, it's going to stay flush, and as a result, I can just neatly put that together right there. Now, the one thing that's a lot easier than making a cabinet is you can't just flip the cabinet over when you haven't put it all together, but you certainly can with a small piece of foam. So I've got it pinned at the bottom. It's loose here at the top, and so by just flipping it over, a little bit easier to work at, I can just slide that other pin into here. That's done now. The next thing is I've got my ramp here, and I just want to make certain that my distance when I'm cutting it is exactly what I want. So I'm going to go right to the back where there's no flex there and mark it so I know what to cut so that it makes certain these fit in. The other one I did, I think I didn't calculate correctly for the width of these two, and as a result it was too long, or it was one too long, or whatever it was. It was too long, I had to cut some off. So this way I'm going to try and ensure that I get an exact tight fit, and then I can pull the pins out, glue, repin, and away we are to the races. So I'm going to get that test fitted and marked, and then I'll show you that. I might entitle this video How to Pin Things. Wow. Just dry pinning, no glue. It gives you a great sense of, okay, this is going together the way I want it to. Really easy to take apart, reassemble, hasn't done any damage. And when you do end up gluing it, leaving those pins in, just gives you some structural support. So I love that idea. I'm debating on whether or not I like this ramp length. I'm following a template that was made by someone else, and I don't know. I like my ramps to be longer, I think, but I'm not quite decided on that. So we may end up with a different ramp length. We'll see. It also occurred to me I can pin this whole thing together and test it with dice before I glue it or go any farther. So I may just go ahead with that. So we'll see how I tinker around, and I'll let you know. Okay, so a couple of things. I decided I wanted a bigger ramp, and I cut up the front to make the ramp. Wasn't paying attention. But here's what I mean. Up at the top, you can see how much space that ramp is taking, and the next one down as well. And then the bottom, I really like having that full ramp so it kicks the dice straight out. So it's much longer. It actually goes all the way across here. And I did that with my other dice tower. But again, playing with it sort of helped me see it. You can kind of see the pen marks there as well as the pinning. And we're going to give this thing a test in a second. And then obviously I'll need to cut a reel back for this. But let's give this a test. Okay, here we go. Test. Let's see how this goes. Woo! Always exciting to see something go the first time. Here's why you do glue something though. I forgot to pin the top of that. But hey, with only what, 2 pins in it and no glue, it still I think did a good job. All right, let's continue building this and fix up some of these mistakes and actually do some gluing. One of the key elements to this whole project, once I committed myself to doing it, was the idea that I wanted minis to actually be able to stand on that upper deck parapet area. So here's Lex Supra standing in to show us what it looks like. It's got that nice red cloak that evokes a Roman soldier, which is kind of cool as well. Um, and testing now the parapet and also the roof overhang to make certain that there's enough room for them in both dimensions. Here I've moved on to the wood portion of the tower. It took a while to cut all those strips and get them all the right size. You can see I've got a whole stack of them ready to go. And then I started doing the notching. In order to keep this matched up, I had a little template piece that I made certain I matched against as I cut them. In retrospect, it might have been easier to have made that notch off a huge slab and then from there cut the slab into the sticks. But, you know, hindsight's 2020. But if you're doing this yourself, that might be a good idea. That gives you a view of my late night crafting. That's my crafting space when my hips get really bad and I can't sit up in the crafting room or at a table anymore. So that's quite often where if I've got all the pieces ready to assemble, I'll work on them on the TV tray. You can see there that I've got the wood portions assembled in layers and just sort of fitting them one at a time onto the tower to make certain they look good and that they're fitting the way I would like them to fit. So my process here in building this was to assemble one square of the wood at a time, which meant gluing them, letting them dry, and moving on to the next. And then in between, I also skipped back and forth and assembled and glued the roof. And then once I had a glued section ready, I would then texture it and add it to the tower. So in between the drying time, since I was using the PVA glue, the white glue, I was able to sort of utilize my time in between until it was ready to actually be put onto the tower. So here are the railings. I decided to use the foam rather than the foam core. I didn't like the way the paper would look with that double edge on it, and the black foam core paper I had was the kind that doesn't peel off. Anyway, so to make these, each one of the X's is actually a rectangle that I cut the triangles out of the edges for. That was proving a lot easier than trying to fit together the arms in this angle. Um, so once I'd fitted them in, I tended to pin them. Um, Again, just impatient to wait for the glue to dry and also just to sort of sturdy it up a little bit. So I would pin them all together, glue it all together, and lay it aside. Once I had all of them made, I then went back and textured the wood grain into each of them. And wherever I actually had holes, I used those to make little knots in the wood, and that seemed to really add to the texturing effect. And I made a point of wherever I had pins that I thought I would pull out later, I did the same thing around the pin head. I would make a knot design so when the pin is removed later and the hole is left, it looks just like part of the knots in the wood. Here's a close-up of the texturing and just again my work area. Oh, there's a Dungeon Master, Professor Dungeon Master in the background. That was my inspiration to keep me working through all of this. Have that running in the background. He's got some great techniques and information about being a Dungeon Master. Check him out if you haven't already checked out his channel. So, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please click like and subscribe, and hammer that bell. If you'd like to find more of my content, you can check me out on Facebook. If you like some merchandise, I have a store on TeePublic. Both of those are under the Angry Dwarf. And if you're at all interested in fantasy maps or would like to commission a map, you can check out my site, williamsonsmaps.com. This is John, aka the Angry Dwarf, signing off.